Hello everyone and welcome to this week's edition of the Cheap Meal presented by Deep Fried Draft. My name is Brian Bosarge. We're going to do things a little bit different this week on the Cheap Meal. As I said in the last video, I went on a little vacation last weekend. It put me a little behind the normal schedule, if you will. And so there will be no review of last week's 7 games that I watched, as we'll get into some news from the week. We've got some coaching changes, some injury news, and coming up at the end, we're going to talk about the first 12 accepted invites to this year's Reese's Senior Bowl. As we do every week, though, we're going to preview the games on tap, and this week 13 of them coming at you. So we're going to start with tomorrow night. Friday night, 8 p.m. on ESPN2, UNLV at Boise State. UNLV helped Boise out last week with a 69-66 3-overtime win over Wyoming. Now Boise's got to needs to win out and have Wyoming lose to San Diego State this week. Prospect I'm focusing in on for Boise State is senior inside linebacker number 20 Tanner Vallejo. 6'1", 226. Saturday morning, 11 a.m., ESPN2, Kansas State at Baylor. Baylor senior running back Shock Linwood was suspended last week for attitude issues, and his draft stock will be questioned because of it. For Kansas State, the prospect to watch in this game is going to be number 75, senior defensive end Jordan Willis. 11 a.m. on Sports New York, SNY. Fordham at Bucknell. This game marks probably my last chance pre-All-Star games to see Bucknell senior offensive tackle Julianne Davenport, who is rumored to have a Senior Bowl invite, and Fordham tight end Faison Odom, who I hope has a Senior Bowl invite. Odom's a top 100 player for me. Davenport has a chance to get there. 11 a.m. ESPNU. UTSA at Texas A&M. Mentioned a few weeks ago that I like the Roadrunner junior quarterback Dalton Sturm. I want to see how he plays against the pass rush of the Aggies in this one. Noon on the SEC Network, Florida at LSU. This is the Hurricane Matthew makeup game. Florida's got a lot of injuries they're dealing with right now. They can lock up an SEC championship game berth, however, with a win. LSU blew out Arkansas last week. Pretty much dominated that one bell to bell. Prospect matchup to watch in this game for me is Florida junior defensive tackle number 57, Caleb Brantley, against the LSU senior center Ethan Pocic. 2:30 p.m. on ESPNU, Buffalo at Western Michigan. Western Michigan continues their march to an unbeaten season. They were passed this week in the college playoff rankings by Boise State, so that is important. If Boise State was able to win the Mountain West Championship, then Western Michigan would not be invited to a New Year's Six bowl game. This game will also be the site of ESPN College Game Day this week, so good for the Broncos. I want to focus on a prospect for Buffalo, however, as I want to get a look at their senior tight end, number 85, Mason Schreck. 2:30 p.m. on the CBS Sports Network, San Diego State at Wyoming. We mentioned earlier Wyoming needs to win this game to keep its division lead over Boise State and force a rematch in the Mountain West Conference Championship game. It'll also would cost Boise State a chance at a New Year's Six bowl game. San Diego State, however, would have a chance to get in the New Year's Six bowl game if they can win out. Donnell Pumphrey is still on his march to history, still has a chance to pass Ron Dane's record for most yards ever by an FBS running back. Caveat being that Pumphrey's going to likely play 14 games, where Dane's stats, I believe, only count to 11 or 12. On Also want to see how Wyoming redshirt sophomore quarterback Josh Allen does against the experienced Aztecs secondary. 2:30 p.m. on Fox, Washington State at Colorado. And if you just said before the season started that in mid-November these two would have New Year's Six, this game would have New Year's Six bowl and Pac-12 championship game possibilities, I probably would have called you crazy. Prospects to watching this game is going to be Washington State junior quarterback Luke Falk against the Buffalo's talented defensive backs Chidobe Awuzie and Tedrick Thompson. 6 p.m. ESPN2 Chattanooga at Alabama. Chattanooga's got a couple of draftable prospects and senior offensive tackle number 62 Corey Levin, who's 6'5", 305, and defensive end number 93 Keontae Davis. Davis is the more well thought of the two for the next level. As always, this game will be a good barometer to see possibly what kind of success they can have at the NFL level. 6 p.m. on the CBS Sports Network, South Florida at SMU. Game matching up with two explosive offenses. South Florida still has a chance to win their division in the American. The prospect I'm focusing on this game is SMU redshirt sophomore wide receiver Cortland Sutton. Sutton's a big wide receiver who's rumored to be declaring for the draft after this season. 6:30 p.m. on Fox, Arizona State at Washington. I want to see how Washington responds after their first loss of the season last week to Southern Cal. Washington junior inside linebacker Azim Victor is going to miss the rest of the season with an injury. He didn't play last week. Arizona State junior running back Kylan Ballage is an enigma-type prospect. He has all the tools, but for some reason he just doesn't get the touches in Todd Graham's offense. 7 p.m. on ABC, Oklahoma at West Virginia, and what should be a fun game. Matchup to watch is going to be Oklahoma senior wide receiver number 11, Dede Westbrook, against the West Virginia senior corners Antonio Crawford, number 1, and number 18, Maurice Fleming. I just realized I skipped over the news I said I was going to talk about, so we'll go back to that. 2 coaching hires made. It was Fresno State, after they fired their head coach Tim DeRuyter, has hired Jeff Tedford, former Cal head coach, renowned quarterback expert, not necessarily successful at the NFL level quarterbacks, but renowned quarterback expert nonetheless. And Florida International has replaced Ron Turner with former Miami Hurricane and Cleveland Browns head coach Butch Davis. Davis had his most success with the Hurricanes right there in Miami, so he's hoping to be able to replicate to a level of success with the Golden Panthers. Some injuries, some season-ending injuries to talk about with some players we have spoke of in the past. River Craycraft, a slot receiver from Washington State, out for the year. Seth Russell, quarterback for Baylor, who we're going to talk about in just a second, broke his ankle. Had successful surgery, hoping to be back for his pro day. And Florida safety Marcus May has also suffered a season-ending injury. Now, when I say we're going to talk about Seth Russell, that's because, as I said earlier, the Senior Bowl announced its first 12 accepted invites, and Seth Russell was one of them. However, with him being injured, there's no way he'll be back before the end of January at the Senior Bowl. So we'll now talk about the other 11 players. Toby Baker, a punter from Arkansas. I did not have him on my radar up to this point because I haven't really evaluated much of the special teams. But if he's at the Senior Bowl, he's probably one of the top 5 punters in this draft class. Before we go to some other names, I did last Thursday I released what I considered my best guesses to what skill players were going to be invited to the Senior Bowl, and so far I'm done fairly well with these guesses. The only receiver, there were 4 receivers that accepted invites on this first go. One of them was Taywan Taylor, a receiver from Western Kentucky. I didn't have him as one of my guesses, but the other 3, Amba Etta Tawo, who is currently my number 21 wide receiver, Cooper Kupp from Eastern Washington, my current number 13 wide receiver, and Ryan Switzer from North Carolina, my current number 14 wide receiver. I had guessed all of those correctly. Another quarterback from Cal, Davis Webb, currently my number 8 overall quarterback. I guessed that one correctly, as well as one of the 2 fullbacks that I had guessed was Sam Rogers from Virginia Tech, currently my number 1 fullback. A couple of offensive linemen accepted invites. Taylor Moton from Western Michigan. Is he a guard? Is he a tackle? He currently plays right tackle for the Broncos, but the Senior Bowl has him listed as a guard, so let's assume that that's where he's his best fit. And a player I did not have on my list for obvious reasons, because I'm not even sure what level of play Kutztown is. They've had 2. They've had 1 alumni in the Senior Bowl, John Mobley, who was a longtime NFL linebacker, and Hall of Famer Andre Reed. But this is Jordan Morgan, an offensive guard from Kutztown, will be at the Senior Bowl this year. Another skill player that I had guessed correctly was South Alabama tight end Gerald Everett, my current number 8 tight end. And safety from Nebraska, Nate Geary. So those are the first 12 names for the Senior Bowl. This week's Deep Fried Draft Rookie of the Week is once again Dallas Cowboys running back Ezekiel Elliott, who at this point his only competition for Offensive Rookie of the Year is likely to be his teammate quarterback Dak Prescott. Elliott at this point, it should be considered as a possibility to be the overall NFL MVP. He's having such a great rookie season. But that's going to do it for this week's edition of the Cheat Meal. As always, follow me on Twitter at Deep Fried Draft. Like us on Facebook at facebook.com/deepfrieddraft. Search us on YouTube. Just search Deep Fried Draft to watch this video and others. As always, visit us at deepfrieddraft.com. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next week. Good night.